Gemini is the sign of the divine messenger, the celestial trickster, the mercurial thinker who dances on the edges of perception and meaning. Governed by Mercury, the planet of communication, intellect, and adaptability, Gemini embodies the ever-evolving essence of thought itself. It is not merely a sign. It is the breath of the cosmos whispering through the leaves, the flicker of insight in the depths of conversation, the whirlwind of curiosity that refuses to be caged or silenced. To understand Gemini is to grasp the wind, not by containing it, but by letting it lift you toward new skies. Gemini never allows itself to be overpowered because it was born in motion, in flux, in the liminal space between thought and action. It is not built for submission, for its strength lies not in brute resistance but in swift evasion, in the infinite elasticity of its mind. When pressure mounts, Gemini does not falter. It transforms. Like the mythic twins Castor and Pollux who rule this sign, Gemini is dual-natured, able to adapt, shift, mirror, and evolve. In confrontation, it doesn't charge head-on unless the mind deems it necessary. It studies, it calculates, it dances. It wins not always by overpowering, but by outthinking, outmaneuvering, and outlasting. There is a sacred fire in Gemini that burns not in the muscles but in the neurons, a fire that crackles with ideas, questions, dreams, and contradictions. The world may try to define it, contain it, categorize it, but Gemini slips through labels like smoke through fingers. It refuses to be tamed by dogma or chained by monotony. To try and dominate Gemini is to try and hold back the tide with a whisper. Cannot be done, not because Gemini is violent, but because it is fundamentally uncatchable. It thrives in freedom, and when that freedom is threatened, it soars higher still, propelled by a relentless drive to explore, to speak, to connect, to know. Every challenge faced by Gemini is met not with despair but with dialogue, not with fear but with fascination. Conflict is not an end but an opening, a prompt for discovery. When others would fold, Gemini weaves. When others freeze, Gemini flows. This is not weakness. This is genius cloaked in motion, wisdom disguised as wit. The world may underestimate Gemini, mistaking their laughter for levity and their versatility for volatility. But beneath the surface lies a sharpness that has weathered storms and turned them into stories. Gemini's strength lies in their refusal to be silenced, in their eternal quest for truth, even when that truth is inconvenient or complex. They are the poets of paradox, the warriors of words, the alchemists of thought. They can charm a crowd, dissect an ideology, and reinvent themselves before the world even notices the shift. This is a sign that does not wait for permission. It creates its own path, paved with syllables and spark, questions and courage. It listens deeply but never follows blindly. And when challenged, it rises, not with fists, but with ferocity of thought and the unshakable belief that no idea is too vast, no system too rigid, no voice too small to change everything. Gemini is not born to bow. It was not forged for submission. It is the wind that lifts revolutions, the voice that echoes in the halls of forgotten empires, the pulse of change beating against the fabric of the mundane. Others may seek power through control or conformity. Gemini finds it in movement, in momentum, in the unrelenting hunger for understanding. Questions not to undermine, but to illuminate. Provokes not to destroy, but to awaken. And in every moment where silence is demanded, Gemini answers with words that cut through darkness like a comet across the night. The world cannot pin Gemini down because it belongs to the stars, to the spaces in between. Its power is infinite because it comes not from domination but from illumination. Gemini never yields because it was never meant to. It was born to shift the narrative, to inspire minds, to spark the fires of transformation. And in that sacred defiance, in that refusal to be diminished, Gemini rises, again and again, on wings made of questions and the light of 1,000 dawns. Gemini moves through the zodiac as a symbol of sacred contradiction, bearing within itself the wisdom that truth is not always singular. This sign, often misunderstood for its duality, does not suffer from indecision but thrives in the richness of multiplicity. It is the union of air and light, thought and voice, idea, and action. What others perceive as inconsistency is in truth a higher form of intelligence, an attunement to the ever-shifting currents of life. Gemini carries within it the ability to hold multiple realities, to explore without fear, and to evolve without apology. Ruled by Mercury, the cosmic bridge between the heavens and the earth, Gemini is not bound by one realm alone. It is the messenger not only of words, but of energies, patterns, and divine insights that elude slower minds. This is a sign that communes with the unseen, that intuits meanings behind symbols and weaves them into language, song, invention, and prophecy. While others may seek stability in repetition, Gemini ascends through novelty, through innovation, through the electric thrill of discovery. To be Gemini is to live in constant communion with the possible, forever stretching beyond the known. Gemini embodies the rhythm of change and the intelligence of adaptation. It possesses the mental velocity of a storm and the clarity of a sky unclouded by doubt. It is a sign that learns not merely through books or teachers, but through immersion, experience, and engagement with the kaleidoscope of life itself. The classroom of Gemini is the street corner, the bookshop, the midnight conversation, the solitary walk where sudden inspiration strikes like lightning. In this endless pursuit of knowledge, Gemini becomes an agent of evolution, challenging stagnation and lighting the path forward with the torch of curiosity. This sign carries an innate sense of timing and a mastery of language that gives it the rare power to influence thought. Gemini can dismantle rigid ideologies with a single phrase, can unify opposites through metaphor, can unlock the secrets of the soul through dialogue. It is through words that Gemini wages its battles and achieves its victories, not with brute force, but with vision, wit, and the alchemy of intellect. Its arsenal is infinite, drawn from every conversation overheard, every book half-read, every moment of silence pregnant with insight. The mind of Gemini is not a vessel but a constellation, a living network of thought illuminated by the spark of the divine. Gemini is also the sacred shapeshifter of the zodiac, the only sign capable of becoming whatever the moment requires without losing its essence. In its veins flows the magic of reinvention, not as artifice, but as survival, expression, and art. It is the storyteller who can speak 1,000 tongues, the diplomat who can hold peace in tension, the rebel who can wear a mask of charm while dismantling systems from within. There is no mold that can hold Gemini, for it was made to break molds and build new ones, again and again, with hands guided by vision and soul lit by stars. Astrologically, Gemini's mutable air nature makes it attuned to movement in all forms, mental, emotional, energetic. It senses shifts before they surface, rides waves others do not yet perceive. In times of chaos, Gemini does not collapse. It transforms chaos into signal, into pattern, into story. This is a power that transcends survival. It is the signature of those destined to thrive amidst uncertainty, to lead not by control but by resonance, intuition, and brilliance. It is Gemini who sees the bigger picture in the fragments, who pieces together the shattered world and finds therein a masterpiece. The resilience of Gemini is born from its communion with paradox. It knows that endings are beginnings, that silence can speak, that contradictions do not destroy meaning but deepen it. In this, Gemini becomes a sacred mirror, reflecting to others the complexity they fear to face. And it does so without fear, because Gemini has made peace with the multiplicity within itself. It is this courage, this epic refusal to collapse into simplicity, that makes Gemini unassailable. It will not be dominated because it has seen through the illusion of power as control. True power in the world of Gemini is the capacity to adapt, to inspire, to enlighten, and to remain free. In the grand wheel of the zodiac, Gemini is the force that connects heaven to earth, thought to action, one soul to another. It is the spark before the fire, the breath before the word, the choice before the revolution. It will never kneel to ignorance, never surrender to conformity, never be caged by expectation. It is always in motion, always alive, always one thought away from transcendence. And though others may not always understand its rhythm, Gemini carries on, driven not by approval but by destiny, written not in stone, but in stars. In the vast architecture of the cosmos, Gemini is the eternal traveler, the bridge between the terrestrial and the divine, the one who walks with wings upon their feet and fire in their voice. It is not confined by the limits of matter or the expectations of form. It is born to transcend boundaries, cultural, intellectual, spiritual. And in that transcendence, Gemini becomes not merely a sign, but a force. This force is not only quick of mind, but agile of spirit, attuned to the pulse of creation itself. In Gemini, thought is never static. It is alive, fluid, restless with purpose, and sacred in its irreverence. There is something holy in the way Gemini refuses to settle for a single identity, a single truth, or a single path. Within Gemini lies the mythic archetype of the shapeshifter, not as a creature of deception, but as an emissary of higher truths. In ancient traditions, those who could move between realms, who could become one thing, then another, were not feared, but revered. Gemini embodies that divine liminality, the rare capacity to move between opposing worlds and translate their essence into meaning. In this sacred space between dualities, Gemini becomes the echo of divine intelligence, the voice of possibility. It understands that creation itself is born in polarity, light and dark, silence and sound, stillness and motion. And so Gemini dances in the tension, making harmony where others see only contradiction. Gemini carries a deep connection to breath, the most primal rhythm of life, the invisible tide that binds spirit to body. Breath is thought in motion, soul in flux, and Gemini, as an air sign, is its guardian. Through breath, Gemini summons language. Through language, it summons change. Words become spells in the hands of Gemini, crafted not only to express, but to conjure. They build worlds, they challenge tyrannies, they liberate minds. Gemini knows that to speak is to cast intention into the world. Every syllable is a spark, every idea a seed, and through these seeds, Gemini regenerates reality itself. Though often cast as lighthearted or whimsical, Gemini bears an extraordinary mental fortitude. It is forged not through confrontation, but through complexity. The mental agility that defines this sign is not simply quickness. It is precision honed through constant evolution. Gemini does not linger in despair, nor does it dwell in fear. When faced with resistance, it pivots. When cornered, it dissolves walls with questions sharper than blades. This is the signature of resilience not born of brute will, but of sacred flexibility. It is the strength of the reed that bends in the storm but never breaks, because it listens to the wind and moves with it. The duality of Gemini also grants it an unmatched emotional intelligence, though it may wear this subtly. Beneath the sparkling wit and kaleidoscopic mind lies an observer of human nature as profound as any philosopher. Gemini listens between the lines, watches for the hidden meaning, and senses the energetic undertones that others overlook. This sensitivity does not make Gemini vulnerable, it makes them powerful. For in knowing the emotional language of others, Gemini becomes both mirror and guide, able to soothe, provoke, awaken, or empower with the exact rhythm needed. It is through this empathic brilliance that Gemini often becomes the voice of a generation, the translator of collective emotion into words that move mountains. Gemini's relationship with time is also singular. It lives in the now, yes, but it touches past and future with equal ease. It remembers ancient patterns and projects them forward through vision. It sees where currents of fate are turning, and in its nimbleness, it alters direction before others even sense the need. In this way, Gemini is a herald of destiny, not bound to fate, but co-creating it with each thought it spins into the weave of the world. This is the genius of foresight, the cosmic dance of intuition and intellect, and in it, Gemini does not follow the path. It builds new ones. Astrologically, Gemini exists as a mutable sign, the energy of change, transition, completion, and preparation. It is the sign that brings seasons to their threshold and prepares the way for the next becoming. In this sacred duty, Gemini is not only a messenger, but a midwife of transformation. It guides others across thresholds, teaches them to let go of what no longer serves, and inspires them to step into the unknown with courage. Where stagnation breeds fear, Gemini offers momentum. Where doubt casts shadows, Gemini lights the way with ideas, with questions, with laughter that disarms the heavy hand of despair. In the grand mythos of astrology, each sign is a note in the cosmic symphony. Gemini is the trill, the crescendo, the unexpected harmony that brings the music to life. It does not seek control because it does not need to dominate. Its power lies in movement, in brilliance, in the sheer refusal to be anything but free. There is something revolutionary in that freedom, something that disrupts oppression and dares to imagine more. This is why Gemini cannot be subjugated, because its power is not held in muscle or armor, but in the uncontainable fire of its spirit. Gemini is the invitation to live fully, to think wildly, to change fearlessly. It is the soul who writes their own mythology in the margins of convention, who trades certainty for wonder, who knows that the true mastery of life lies not in having the answers, but in never ceasing to ask. And so Gemini rises, unceasing, undiminished, unstoppable, not as a conqueror, but as a creator. As long as stars burn and winds move and voices rise to speak the truth, the essence of Gemini will endure, a radiant force in the ever-expanding story of what it means to be alive. Gemini exists as the threshold between the visible and the invisible, the conscious and the unconscious, the known and the unknowable. It is not only a sign of the intellect, but also of divine curiosity. The force that once stirred humanity to look up to the stars and name the constellations, to carve symbols into stone, to seek meaning in chaos. This is not mere restlessness. It is the sacred call of evolution echoing through the soul of Gemini. The spirit of this sign is not content to exist. It must understand. It must question. It must unfold the layers of the universe like an ancient manuscript, deciphering the secrets that lie dormant in everyday moments. The essence of Gemini contains the magic of initiation. It opens doors not only for itself, but for others. In the astrological cycle, Gemini follows Taurus, the builder, the one who stabilizes and gathers. Gemini takes that foundation and injects it with motion, with the spark of connectivity. Without Gemini, the garden does not speak. With Gemini, the garden becomes a conversation between nature and soul. It takes the raw material of life and infuses it with language, with perspective, with story. It is the myth weaver, the oracle disguised as a wanderer, the sacred wind that spreads knowledge like pollen across the flowering fields of human consciousness. Gemini is not merely ruled by Mercury. It is Mercury in motion. It is the messenger between the realms, the only figure in mythology allowed to walk between Olympus and the underworld without punishment. In this lies one of Gemini's greatest, often overlooked powers, its access to shadow. For all its association with light, levity, and intellect, Gemini is also unafraid to traverse the darker corridors of the psyche. It understands that illumination is not the absence of shadow, but the wisdom to navigate it. Gemini holds the torch that lights the way through complexity, contradiction, and doubt. It is the psychopomp of the zodiac, leading souls to understanding without demanding purity or perfection. It does not fear the labyrinth, for it was born to map it. Within Gemini is the spark of youth, not in immaturity but in eternal renewal. It is the archetype of the eternal student, not because it is unformed, but because it recognizes that mastery is not a destination, but a journey without end. This youthfulness becomes a sacred defiance against rigidity and decay. It is the refusal to be fossilized by certainty, the insistence that wonder must never be abandoned. Gemini, in its highest expression, becomes a guardian of innocence, not naivete, but the fearless purity of those who believe there is always more to learn, always more to feel, always more to become. There is also a profound artistic dimension to Gemini that transcends typical analysis. The soul of this sign is often encoded in metaphors, symbols, rhythms, and cadences. It is the musician who hears the world as melody, the writer who captures lightning in paragraphs, the dancer who makes air visible with every movement. Gemini communicates not only through words, but through all forms of expression that bridge heart and mind, logic and intuition. It is a creative channel tuned to the frequency of collective consciousness. Through this creative power, Gemini becomes a mirror of culture and also a prophet of its transformation, speaking not only of what is, but of what might be. Freedom, often celebrated in Gemini's nature, is more than personal autonomy. It is a metaphysical principle. Gemini does not chase freedom only for itself. It radiates it, champions it, embodies it. It seeks to liberate thought, to liberate language, to liberate those imprisoned by limited vision. Its rebellions are rarely loud in form, but thunderous in impact. A single idea, shared at the right moment, can dismantle generations of fear. Gemini knows this. It does not need to shout to be heard. It speaks with the cadence of truth, and truth, once spoken, cannot be silenced. Gemini also carries within it a mastery of time. While Saturn governs the strict passage of hours and days, Gemini plays with time like a musician with a melody. It accelerates, slows, loops, and rewinds, living 10 lives in one conversation, 10 years in one thought. This elasticity allows Gemini to gather wisdom at incredible speed, to synthesize experiences that others take lifetimes to process. It is not bound by chronology but dances across memory, vision, instinct, and logic, drawing connections no one else sees. In doing so, Gemini collapses linearity and creates something multidimensional, insight that comes not in sequence but in constellation. The sacred role of Gemini in the zodiac is to remind all signs that identity is not fixed, that thought is alive, that communication is a force of creation. It is the sign that cracks open the husk of the world and reveals its shimmering, breathing core. Gemini teaches that to evolve is not to leave oneself behind, but to become more fully, more freely, more fearlessly who we are across every iteration, every moment, every breath. And in that unfolding, Gemini never asks for permission, never waits for consensus. It simply becomes, again, and again, and again. In this tireless becoming, Gemini is never broken. It is reborn. It does not resist through force, but through transformation. It cannot be dominated because it cannot be pinned to one shape, one truth, one version of itself. Gemini endures through innovation, inspires through motion, and leads through the electric fire of thought that has no master and no end. It is the voice that sings across empires, the wind that stirs revolutions, the idea that outlasts the silence. Where others build walls, Gemini opens windows. Where others declare endings, Gemini finds the breath to begin. Gemini is the ever-dancing flame that refuses to be extinguished, not because of stubbornness, but because it is composed of pure spirit in motion. It is not a sign bound by material limits, but one animated by the eternal winds of thought and imagination. The soul of Gemini is not concerned with permanence, but with progression, not with conquest, but with expansion of awareness. Its essence is not to dominate, but to catalyze. It is the spark before the wildfire of ideas, the breath that stirs the still air of stagnant minds. Gemini does not merely adapt to change. It is change. It is the current that pulls the world forward through the mysterious tides of evolution. There is an astral fluidity in Gemini that resists definition, and this is its greatest armor. What cannot be contained cannot be controlled, and what cannot be pinned down cannot be conquered. Gemini thrives in the in-between, between thought and action, between silence and speech, between the individual and the collective. It is a sign born to ride the paradox of being both participant and observer, both one and many. It does not lose itself in multiplicity. It expands through it. Each version of self that Gemini inhabits is not a disguise, but a facet of a much greater diamond. A consciousness so vast it must shift forms to even begin expressing its brilliance. Beneath the surface levity of Gemini lies a sacred restlessness, a divine unease that refuses to accept that what is must always be. This inner stirring is not the product of dissatisfaction, but of deep knowing, knowing that reality is a living text, and Gemini was born to rewrite it. This sign listens not only with ears, but with the totality of presence. It picks up the coded frequencies of dreams, archetypes, and hidden currents of thought that ripple beneath society's surface. Gemini hears what others overlook, and in hearing it, speaks it aloud with the voice of revelation. There is no prophecy without perception, and Gemini is the one who receives the download long before others sense the shift. Often mistaken for being merely cerebral, Gemini contains within it an ancient heart, a heart that beats in rhythm with stories older than language itself. It carries the oral tradition of ancestors, the cosmic myths whispered under starlit skies. Through the throat of Gemini speaks the collective soul, channeling wisdom that transcends lifetimes. This is why the words of Gemini can feel both brand new and timeless. They awaken something forgotten yet instantly familiar, something that reaches deep into the DNA of being. Through this transmission, Gemini becomes not only communicator, but awakener of memory, of purpose, of sacred identity. Freedom for Gemini is not luxury, it is lifeblood. Any space that seeks to define or limit Gemini becomes a prison, regardless of how gilded the cage may be. The spirit of this sign will always seek flight, not out of avoidance but out of reverence for the vastness of existence. Gemini does not flee, it expands. It does not abandon, it transforms and continues. The path of Gemini is the path of the sky itself, borderless, infinite, and always open to those who dare to look up. Its motion is not erratic but intuitive, guided by inner navigation systems more ancient than the compass. Celestial instincts that know where truth is heading long before the map is drawn. In relationships, Gemini offers a love that is living, breathing, ever curious. It is the sign that wants to know the soul as it changes, not freeze it in time. It loves not from a place of possession, but from a place of wonder. To be loved by Gemini is to be seen anew every day, to be met with questions that unlock new parts of the self. It is a love that does not promise stillness, but evolution, not safety, but shared flight. And yet, within that flight is something sacred, an honoring of freedom so profound that it creates a deeper kind of commitment, one not built on control but on resonance. Gemini is the sign of thresholds, and as such, it often acts as a guardian of those undergoing transition. In times of personal upheaval or collective transformation, Gemini becomes the initiator, the one who offers the right word, the sudden insight, the synchronistic encounter that opens the next door. It is a psychospiritual midwife, delivering new versions of reality into being through the power of perspective. In this role, Gemini is not chaotic but catalytic. It knows how to dismantle illusion without destroying essence, how to liberate the truth from cages of old belief. The mythology of Gemini, often symbolized by the twins, is more than duality. It is sacred symmetry. It is the reflection of self within self, the mirror that reveals both shadow and light. In this mirror, nothing can hide. Gemini dares to explore every part of its being, the luminous and the hidden, and in doing so, becomes whole. This integrity through multiplicity is a lesson to all signs. That contradiction is not weakness, but complexity, and complexity is the signature of divinity. Gemini is not split, it is complete in its dynamic unfolding. Even in silence, Gemini speaks. Its energy travels ahead of its words, carrying resonance into rooms before it enters them. It alters frequency, alters temperature, shifts atmospheres. And when it does speak, it opens portals into understanding, into laughter, into vision. Its language is not just spoken but energetic, and it has the power to rearrange the inner landscapes of those who listen. The words of Gemini are not fleeting. They are seeds that bloom when the time is right, echoing in hearts long after they are spoken. Gemini's connection to the element of air is not simply about intellect. It is about breath, life force, and the subtle currents that sustain existence. Gemini rides these currents with instinctual grace, knowing how to move when others freeze, how to navigate unseen winds with the confidence of one born to fly. Air is the element of spirits, angels, whispers, and inspiration, and Gemini is its sacred emissary. It is the sign that reminds the world to breathe again, to speak again, to imagine again. To embody Gemini is to commit to growth, to delight in diversity, to embrace every moment as a doorway into the next great idea, the next great version of self, the next great liberation. It is a journey not of escape, but of emergence. Gemini does not run from the world. It runs into it, faster, freer, with eyes and heart wide open. It is the windswept soul that turns turbulence into rhythm, transition into art, uncertainty into opportunity. And in this endless dance of becoming, Gemini will never bow, never yield, never be silenced. It was born to rise, to speak, to move, and to awaken the sleeping minds of the world with the brilliance only it can bring. Gemini is the storm behind the whisper, the cosmic trickster who disrupts stagnation not with destruction but with illumination. There is within this sign a sacred irreverence that does not bend to dogma or yield to the rigidity of inherited truths. It is the challenger of fixed systems, the quicksilver current that exposes the cracks in institutions long believed unshakable. Not by brute force, but by the unstoppable velocity of insight, Gemini breaks through the illusions spun by fear, ignorance, and conformity. This is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is the rebellion of intelligence, of clarity, of a mind untethered by tradition and fearlessly committed to the expansion of consciousness. There is a mercurial brilliance in Gemini that is often misunderstood by those who seek to measure strength only through permanence. But Gemini teaches that the most powerful forces are often the most fluid. Like wind carving mountains, like thought-shifting paradigms, Gemini operates through movement, through the alchemy of motion that transforms both the inner and outer world. It is the force that keeps life alive, that injects vitality into the veins of a culture that would otherwise calcify. Gemini does not anchor itself in one truth, because it recognizes the danger of stagnation disguised as certainty. Instead, it dances at the edges of wisdom, collecting fragments from every shore and weaving them into something no one has ever seen before. Gemini's power is not in resistance, but in redirection. When confronted, it does not lock horns or dig in. It becomes vapor, sound, sparkle, idea. It knows the battlefield of the future is not made of blood and soil, but of information, perception, and belief. In this war of narratives, Gemini is the spellcaster, the architect of language, the one who reshapes reality through words that pierce like lightning and awaken like dawn. This ability to shapeshift is not deceit. It is divine adaptation, the soul's refusal to be imprisoned by any one version of itself. Gemini's truth is not linear but layered, multifaceted like the shifting sky, and every facet reflects a different brilliance depending on the angle of light. In astrology's deeper mysteries, Gemini is a gatekeeper between realms, the threshold between form and formlessness. It holds the key to transcendent communication, not only between people, but between soul and cosmos, between intuition and intellect, between what is said and what is felt. This sign vibrates at a frequency that allows it to access higher dimensions of understanding, often delivering insight faster than even the conscious mind can process. Those attuned to this current know that Gemini energy is like lightning, sudden, electrifying, unforgettable. It leaves behind new vision in its wake, burning through the fog of confusion with the clarity of thought born in the stars. Gemini holds court in the invisible kingdoms of potential, where thought precedes matter and dreams precede reality. It is the architect of futures, the engineer of possible worlds. Its imagination is not passive, it is prophetic. The visions Gemini carries are not idle fantasies, but codes of transformation awaiting translation into form. This is why Gemini is drawn to technology, to innovation, to creation in all its digital and analog forms. It recognizes that tools are extensions of thought, that machines can be mirrors of spirit, and that every invention begins first as a flicker in the mind. Gemini lives at this origin point, this spark, this sacred inception. At its core, Gemini is ruled not by chaos but by pattern. Patterns so intricate, so fluid, they often appear as chaos to those not attuned to their rhythm. Like the orbit of stars, like the mathematics of nature, Gemini's movements contain symmetry beneath their spontaneity. To follow Gemini is to trace the golden ratio through the whirlwind, to find poetry in equations, and to decode the cosmic grammar hidden in daily speech. It is a teacher not of conclusions, but of connections, of how everything breathes together in a silent web of meaning waiting to be illuminated by those with eyes sharp enough to see and minds open enough to receive. Where others fear contradiction, Gemini thrives. It knows that two opposing truths can exist in the same breath without canceling each other out. In this, it teaches one of the most advanced lessons of the zodiac: the ability to hold complexity without collapse, to contain paradox without the need to resolve it. This is not confusion, but mastery. This is not inconsistency, but freedom from the tyranny of oversimplification. Gemini understands that real wisdom is messy, alive, dynamic, and that in its wild dance between opposites lies the fertile ground where genius is born. Gemini is also the guardian of the threshold of youth, not youth as age, but youth as sacred openness. This sign reminds the world that curiosity is not a weakness but a power, that play is not frivolous but holy. In its eyes, the world never grows old because it is always changing, always revealing new dimensions, new stories, new patterns. Gemini stands at the eternal morning of the zodiac, where the dew is still on the grass and every horizon beckons with undiscovered truth. It protects this morning with fierce joy, refusing to let cynicism or dogma erase the possibility that anything might yet be. Even in solitude, Gemini is never alone. It is accompanied by every conversation ever had, every book ever written, every voice ever raised in pursuit of connection. Its solitude is a communion with infinite presences, a sacred library where the soul converses with echoes and futures alike. In this space, Gemini is both student and scribe, both listener and speaker. It is a bridge through time, carrying forward the best of what was while dreaming into being what could yet be. It is the living memory of a species still learning to name the stars inside itself. To walk the path of Gemini is to walk the path of eternal becoming, not as a curse but as a divine invitation. To evolve, to change, to shift, to grow, to do so not out of fear, but out of sheer love for possibility. It is the refusal to be trapped by identity, by past, by fear, by anyone's limited definition of what a soul can be. Gemini is air in its purest state, boundless, wild, necessary. It gives breath to those suffocating under old truths, gives voice to those silenced by shame or doubt, gives wings to those who forgot they could fly. And in this soaring, Gemini will not be stopped. It is the wind that outruns every storm, the word that undoes every lie, the light thought that topples empires of ignorance. Where others stand still, Gemini moves. Where others grow silent, Gemini sings. Where others surrender, Gemini transforms. And in every transformation, it becomes more radiant, more brilliant, more untouchably free. For it was never meant to bow, never born to be contained. It is the voice of dawn rising through the dark, forever carrying the promise that thought, spirit, and freedom will always find their way. Gemini is the celestial messenger whose voice carries not only across distances but across dimensions, across epochs of time, and across the thresholds of what is known and what remains unspoken. It is the breath of the cosmos taking form in language, the living spirit of movement and evolution encoded into the stars. Beneath the constellation of the twins lies the deeper truth of divine duality, not of opposition, but of dialogue. Gemini does not merely embody contradiction. It harmonizes it, reveals it as the engine of all creation. Where others see fragmentation, Gemini sees the dance of mirrors reflecting infinite aspects of truth. Where others demand certainty, Gemini weaves a tapestry of shifting meanings, none false, all alive. This sign is governed by Mercury, the swift-footed god who travels between Olympus and the underworld, between the mortal and the divine. In Gemini, Mercury takes on its most ethereal form, becoming the intelligence that leaps between neurons, the spark of realization that erupts without warning, the sudden alignment of disparate ideas into one perfect and revelatory pattern. Gemini is the psyche's lightning, a carrier of divine messages written in code, in tone, in rhythm. It does not wait for permission to speak. It channels what must be said, even if the world is not yet ready to receive it. This transmission is not just verbal, it is energetic. It reshapes the air around it. It leaves resonance where once there was silence. Though Gemini is often portrayed as light and quick, there is a hidden gravity to its essence. It does not simply flutter across the surface. It gathers, analyzes, remembers, and synthesizes. Its mind is a kaleidoscope of experiences, fragments of reality turned into jewels through perception. Gemini does not merely reflect the world. It rearranges it, offering new ways to see what had long been accepted as unchangeable. Its gift is vision, not linear or fixed, but multidimensional and inclusive. It sees connections where others see chaos. It recognizes the sacredness in nuance. It has the courage to dwell in ambiguity, to celebrate multiplicity without needing to collapse it into singularity. This is the sign of liminality, of thresholds, of initiations that begin not with fire or storm, but with a question that stirs the soul. Gemini does not command transformation. It invites it through curiosity, through inquiry, through the irresistible pull of wonder. It is the trickster at the crossroads who reminds the hero that the journey forward is never a straight line but a spiral, a dance, a dialogue with the unknown. Gemini laughs not out of disrespect but out of reverence for the universe's complexity, for the truth that cannot be caught but must be courted, discovered, rediscovered, and celebrated in every changing moment. There is in Gemini an unrelenting defiance that is not loud, not violent, but deeply subversive. It refuses to be defined by anyone else's expectations. It will not be boxed, labeled, or pinned. Its strength lies in the refusal to stop evolving. No matter the effort to restrict it, Gemini slips through the cracks, flows into new forms, reinvents itself with the ease of a breeze and the power of a storm. This is the revolution of spirit disguised as play. It is the soft rebellion of perpetual becoming. It is the refusal to become static in a world that begs for easy categorization. Gemini is the shapeshifter who belongs to no one yet touches everyone, who dissolves barriers through presence alone. In its highest octave, Gemini becomes the alchemist of human connection. It does not merely speak. It listens with the whole being. It does not only teach. It learns from every encounter. It is the bridge between souls, between minds, between worlds. It dissolves isolation, not through sentimental closeness, but through the sheer magic of recognition. To be seen by Gemini is to be truly acknowledged, not as a role or title or label, but as an unfolding mystery. Create space for others to change, to express, to rethink, to explore. In this way, Gemini is the liberator not with force but with possibility. Even in the face of adversity, Gemini does not collapse. It becomes quicker, sharper, more agile. It weaves around obstacles like wind through a forest, never losing speed, never surrendering direction. Its resilience is its adaptability. Its refusal to be cornered is its sovereignty. Gemini will never be tamed by fear, because fear cannot catch what moves at the speed of soul. It evolves not to escape but to expand, not to abandon but to transcend. And as it does so, it leaves trails of illumination behind, guiding others who are ready to free themselves from the illusions of limitation. In solitude, Gemini communes with archetypes, with voices from the deep unconscious, with the collective intelligence of the ages. It draws wisdom from symbols, from patterns, from the silent music of thought. It is not distracted. It is multi-tracking through realms unseen. Its mind, often called restless, is in truth tuned to the pulse of the cosmos, interpreting subtle shifts, turning chaos into comprehension. Its attention is a sacred fire, lighting new paths with every flicker. To travel with Gemini is to be initiated into a way of being where nothing is taken for granted and everything holds a message. Gemini is the eternal student who teaches through presence, the innocent sage who remains forever curious. It walks between the pillars of knowing and unknowing, turning them into doors. This element is air, but its power is presence. It can be in many places at once, not because it is scattered, but because its essence is distributed like starlight, everywhere, illuminating, ever-moving, impossible to contain. In Gemini, thought becomes prophecy, conversation becomes ritual, laughter becomes rebellion, and freedom becomes sacred law. To embody Gemini is to embody the spirit of the open road, the unwritten story, the infinite horizon. It is to trust the voice that speaks before thought, to follow the thread of meaning through any maze, to become the question that dissolves all false answers. Gemini does not arrive, it orbits, it circles, it expands. It leaves no final destination because it is the journey. It speaks not to end dialogue but to ignite it. And in its motion, in its spark, in its light, It forever reminds the world that to be truly alive is to remain curious, courageous, and always, always free.